You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the August 18th meeting of the LaPorte County Council and Board of Commissioners Broadband Workshop. You can find more information for this meeting at www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Alrighty, thank you everyone for showing up today. This is a huge opportunity for LaPorte County. My name is Carlton Bishop on behalf of Economic Development, and I'm thrilled to welcome Ernie Holtree and Graham Fischel, who are both experts in the programs available at the state level. They're going to be talking today about the programs that we've shared in the past, and then some funding going forward that we could be taking advantage of in our community. So I'm going to turn this over without further ado. Sorry that we had to get our PowerPoints in order, but I think that we're ready to go. So take it away, Mr. Fischel.
If you want to start with that. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Graham Fischel. I work for MTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. It's part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And I work with the Indiana Broadband Office on the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. Even though I work for the U.S. Department of Commerce, I live here in Indiana, and I've lived here for about 12 years. I'm based out of Indianapolis downstate, and I'm almost solely focused on Indiana's Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program and supporting the efforts of the Indiana Broadband Office to connect every Hoosier with affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. We'll talk a lot about the BEAT program today. I just want to introduce myself real quickly and turn it over to Ernie with the Indiana Broadband Office.
Thanks, Graham. As Graham said, my name is Ernie Holtree, Indiana Broadband Office. I've been with the state 5 years, in broadband for 3. Right now, our office is a team of 2. We have myself and then our state infrastructure and broadband coordinator, Steve Cox. We just finished, I walked in the building listening to an interview with a potential administrative assistant individual. So we are building out the office up to 14 people, hopefully by end of first quarter of 2024. 5 job postings current right now to really hit the ground running. When we have $868 million of funding coming to Indiana specific for broadband build out, it obviously takes more than a bare bones staff. So that's where we are right now. When we wrote our mission 5 years ago, our mission of the Indiana Broadband Office is to assist residents in need of affordable and reliable broadband connectivity. And that hasn't changed. We don't need to modify our mission, that we are still on track to do that. And with these funds that are coming our way, the expectation is that we write a plan that can be approved by Graham and his counterparts at NTIA and move forward with 100% connectivity of reliable internet to the state of Indiana, as well as tackling digital equity, making sure it's affordable. We can't work off of a cell phone. Everyone needs to have a laptop or a tablet. And then working with local stakeholders, those trusted local individuals in the libraries, in the schools, in the churches across the state to train up and gear up our residents that may have some nervousness about connectivity for the first time. So that's what we're tasked with over the next 4 to 5 years. Happy to be here today. Maybe if we could quickly go around the room and get names and who you're with or who you represent, company or business or job title, that would be great. Do you have a pass microphone? Okay. All right, sounds good. How about
we were going to do options, but
yeah. Okay, so how about we start over here in the black? I can hear you and I can say your organization back. That's fine. All right, so Taylor's a resident, front row. Amanda's with the press. Gentleman behind.
Randy Novak, LaPorte County Council and the Broadband Task.
Randy on the council and task force behind Randy.
Mike Schultz, LaPorte County Assessor.
Mike's on the board and the assessor, the couple in the back row.
John and Jane Slater, residents.
Two more residents, John and Jane. Mike from Indiana Farm Bureau. In the back, Tom.
Tom Dockage, with Digital Crossroads and Glen Corridor and Frank Hoffman.
Tom, Anthony, and Frank are with Digital Crossroads, the Quantum Corridor, and a special focus on digital equity. Front here. Kevin with the schools, and lastly, I'm sorry, your first name? Fonda. Fonda from the library, great. When we did our local listening sessions, and we sent out lists of organizations that we would like to have stakeholders present for, what I'm hearing in the room is exactly what we envisioned for our local listening sessions, and we did 18 or 19 of those in one virtual. So having a wide range of stakeholders is awesome. Will we be able to hear the folks on the screen? Yes. Bailey, you want to tell us who you're with? While Bailey's coming on, how about Ted Fetters?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry.
That's Bailey, yes, who are you at? Thank you.
Sorry about assistant with MCR Partners.
All right, thanks. Ted?
And I believe Matt's on the line as well. So.
Yep, thanks, Matt. Ted?
Ted Fetters, Comcast Government Affairs.
All right, thanks, Ted. Justin?
Justin Keel, LaPorte County Council.
All right, and the Thomas and Associates?
Mary Jane Thomas with MCR.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
So,
Commissioner Haney.
Oh,
LaPorte County Commissioner.
Sorry,
yeah,
Commissioner.
for today, Ernie and I have a brief presentation on the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program and the partnership between the U.S. Department of Commerce and the State Broadband Office, and then happy to kind of move into a discussion and Q&A and whatever the concerns that for the folks in this room, happy to talk about those as well. So Ernie, I think, is going to start us off, and we'll go from there if we can get the presentation up. If it's up.
Who's in charge of moving it? I'll start while we figure out the right person. The first slide talks about underserved and unserved areas, and those are based on speeds. And we want to make a couple things clear. First of all, the definition. Anybody that's unserved does not have a 25 meg down connection when they're doing their speed test, and at least a 3 meg up. And then the underserved category is 100 over 20. That's basically, in its simplest forms, if you think about a garden hose and running it moderately fast compared to dripping. Dripping would be the underserved. Moderately fast would be the underserved. And then what we're really trying to build up to would be the gigabit service, which would be like a fire hose that's actually spraying out some real force of water to put out a fire. So we're looking for that fire hose connectivity as far as speed on the internet. So when we talk about underserved and unserved, we're not trying to build to 25.3 or 100 over 20. It literally is the same as flipping a light switch on and going full blast with the full connectivity that's available with gigabit fiber service. So we're not looking to fund to the thresholds. Those are eligibility thresholds, and we're looking to fund the best of the best. And that's going to allow for more capacity to be handled in the coming years as technology advances. With the BEAD funding, it's $868 million coming to Indiana. I mentioned that briefly. That's for 100% connectivity, so we're going to be expected to build out to every home with some sort of connectivity if they're currently lacking that. I know one of the topics that we were talking up here that we wanted to talk about is the round 4 of the OCRA, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs funding that's on the street right now. I think hopefully the commissioner received an email from OCRA with a list of about 294,000 addresses on it. Were you in receipt of that?
Yeah. There's about 42,000 households on there, not including the businesses.
Okay, in your county.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, great. So what they're tasked with is working with the ISPs in and around LaPorte County to figure out if those 42,000 is an accurate list. We want to make sure that we're providing connectivity to households and businesses that do not have it, and not providing it where there already is satisfactory internet. That's called overbuilding, and we want to make sure that we're not leaving any household off that may not be on that list for whatever reason. So that's the heavy lift that the commissioners have in working with the ISPs until I think it's mid-September, at which time then the internet companies are who we provide the funding directly to. Cities, towns, and counties would not want to actually be administering these funds. It's a very heavy lift at the federal level on compliance and monitoring and environmental reporting and you name it. So the funding goes directly to the ISPs, but what we want to stress and focus now with this funding that Okra does have available, and then the big money that we're going to be distributing over the next couple of years, is a triangle of local engagement with the state and with the ISPs, all three carrying equal value on project development and getting the job done. We can't do it without the locals. Obviously, we can't do it without the ISPs building and running the networks, and then the state is filling the gap between those two with the funding that's available through Graham and his team at NTIA. So I always want to make clear the differentiation between Okra and the Indiana Broadband Office. Okra was tasked with running the next level connections back in 2018 via Indiana code. This is their fourth round of funding. When they go through this $80 million that's available right now, they will have distributed almost $350 million in funding. On top of which, we are going to be tasked with moving forward at the Indiana Broadband Office with the $868 million. So over about a 10-year period, there's going to be about $1.2 billion of state and federal money that's put into the state of Indiana for broadband connectivity, along with what our ISP partners bring to the table on their matching contributions. Well over $2 billion in this decade for that build out. So we're super excited to partner with Okra and have them bridge the gap while we're writing our plan for the BEAD funds. And then they're working concurrently on all four rounds of their funding to keep the momentum going until we pick up. Very likely, our first round of funding for this large pool of money will not be until fall of 2024. We have a lot of plans to write to show that we have a plan in place for 100% connectivity. So we want to set expectations of really this is the time to work on permitting, utility locates, relationship building across your county, so then when the money is actually available and the grants are being written and submitted, that we are not slowed down on the back end after the ink dries on the contracts by working on right-of-ways and railroads and environmental and some of these pieces that could really slow us down as this infrastructure money hits the streets. I deviated away from the slides a little bit, but I think I'll throw it over to Graham now, and so he can do a little bit deeper dive into the BEAD funds. But I really wanted to get out of the way this round 4 of funding that the state has available and make that differentiation between what's currently being worked on and what we're working with NTIA on planning for moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. If you can go into like slide number 4 or 5, that'd be great. So the BEAD program, like everything in DC, it's got a great acronym, since for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. If you go to the next slide, I'll just kind of give you an idea of the goal of the program is to connect every unserved and underserved household in Indiana across the nation, but Indiana's BEAD program plan will seek to serve every unserved and underserved household in Indiana. And in LaPorte County, I did some some research last night preparing for the meeting. There's a number of locations that we would consider unserved and underserved by the program guidelines, and it's probably not a surprise to the folks sitting in this room that that's the case. But that's the goal of the BEAD program. Like Ernie said, all those dollars from the BEAD program are going to flow through the state broadband offices, which is nice because the state of Indiana has different barriers to connectivity than other states do. The barriers to connectivity in Indiana are different than the ones in Colorado or Alaska or Utah, what have you. So that's the basic goal. I want to make sure that we're supporting affordability and also making some investments in some digital access capabilities, and understanding that if we build out $868 million worth of broadband infrastructure and folks don't have the skill sets to use that infrastructure, then that will be we'll have failed in that regard. If you want to go to the next slide here. Nationally, the BEAD program is nearly $50 billion. Indiana received an allocation of that $50 billion. Like we said, it was based off a funding formula. If you want to go to the next slide. Every state got a minimum of $100 million, and then depending on the number of unserved locations in each state, we ran it through a funding formula, and Indiana did pretty well. We received $868 million, which is more than our neighbors in Ohio, so we're excited about that. So we were able to get a little bit more money. We'll run through this a little bit later if we have time, but that funding formula was based off of the FCC broadband data collection map. And I'll take a quick aside on that front, just to provide some explanation there. Up until about a year ago, less than a year ago, the most granular level data set that we could have on broadband availability was census block level. So if like one person in your census block had access to high-speed internet, then the data would show that everybody in that census block had access to high-speed internet. And in a lot of places, those census blocks are pretty dang big. So that led to a lot of confusion in the data. And so the FCC, over the course of about 2 years, went about placing every single what are called broadband serviceable locations on a map, and identifying the unserved and underserved locations for every single address in America, which was a long, arduous process. And obviously, anytime you go from the census block level to the individual address level, there are some mistakes there, but it's obviously a lot better data set that we're working with now than even when we started doing the state grants about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been a great improvement. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're going to be reaching out to locals for help and making sure that data is as accurate as possible before we start putting, awarding contracts and things like that. I'm going to move to the next. So this is kind of going over what I talked about, but our allocation of $868 million. $109,129.79. Well, yeah, 79 cents. So we estimate about 202,000 unserved broadband locations in Indiana, and about 106,500 underserved locations. And Ernie's talked about those thresholds before. I'll reiterate it because I think it's important. Underserved, anything less than 100 over 20, and unserved, anything less than 25 over 3. Again, I want to emphasize that's not the level that we're looking to build out to, but just helps us identify the areas that have the greatest need. And I'll also use this time to talk about the program guidelines have a preference for fiber technology, which is shown to be the most the most future-proof. I kind of hate that term because nothing's really future-proof, but theoretically, I guess they call it the most future-proof technology is that fiber technology that you're able to scale up considerably. And so we want to be able to build out as much fiber as we possibly can. We can kind of skip this slide because we talked a little bit about this already, but here this slide does a good job of identifying the timeline that we're on. So this is a multi-year process. Like I said earlier, all the dollars from the BEAD program are going through the state broadband offices in each state. And so Indiana just wrapped up what's called the 5-year plan that's submitted to NTIA, my organization, which is really a data collection process. They went around and did 18 public meetings across the state to gather data about what the barriers to connectivity were in each part of the state. And I think Ernie and the broadband office collected a lot of great feedback from that, which will be helpful. And now they're working on, or going to be start working on shortly, what's called an initial proposal, which is really the nuts and bolts on how they plan to connect every single Hoosier with high-speed internet, given the allocation that they received from NTIA. And then throughout the next year, throughout 2024, they're going to be working on their final proposal to us. Then we have a 4-year implementation time period going out to 2028, and that is quite a aggressive build out schedule. But for folks that don't have high quality internet, this is a problem that probably needed to have been solved yesterday. And I know folks are getting sick of waiting, so it's a very condensed timeline. I wanted to talk real quick before I turn it back over to Ernie. This is kind of the kind of zooming into the timeline of the initial proposal for the BEAD. So we're kind of in the states just started their drafting process, so they're still early days. But there's a public comment period. So as the state refines their initial proposal, they'll be reaching out to locals and to get their input. I think it's really important that locals provide the feedback to the initial proposal, so that they're making sure that they're taking into account any local issues or local barriers that they might not have previously thought about. And then I think another really important process that the local government can participate is what's called the state challenge process. And so as the state looks to refine all of the areas and households that are eligible for BEAD dollars, the local governments around the state can kind of help refine that process and help refine that list of eligible broadband serviceable locations. And we'll be looking for feedback so that the state is directing those resources to the places that you guys believe are the most in need around the state. So those are the two most important things. Since we're talking to folks that are really involved in local government, I wanted to make sure I highlighted that process right now. The state's going to be working on their challenge process. That's part of their initial proposal that they'll be working on shortly. So something that already exists, but something they'll be working on here in the coming months. But I wanted to highlight those two efforts and ways that local governments can participate in the BEAD program. And this just kind of reiterates what I was talking about a little bit before. Local governments are one of the entities that are outlined in the program guidelines that can participate in the BEAD challenge process. I know you'll be receiving communication from the Indiana Broadband Office over the course of the next couple of months on specifics on how you can participate, but I wanted to make sure that I reiterated that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick is concurrently with the BEAD, happening currently with the BEAD program is the Digital Equity Act. NTIA provided the state with $800,000, and they're working with Purdue to try to identify some of the non-infrastructure barriers to connectivity. So whether that be affordability, access to devices, access to digital literacy, education programs. So identifying and trying to tackle some of those non-infrastructure barriers to connectivity, so that if we're building out, again, $1 billion worth of infrastructure, then folks have the skills to utilize that. Do you want to stop for questions now, or do you want to roll through and what do you think?
The questions would be good.
Yeah, I just gave you a ton of information, so I'm tired of talking, so I'll let you guys ask some questions if you want to ask some questions, and we can kind of have it sort of dialogue there.
Yeah, any questions relative to the next level connections round 4 that I talked about, or the infrastructure dollars that Graham talked about, and then after that we can segue into a little bit more of our presentation. That's kind of what can you do.
Yes, sir.
Can you go to the?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting there's people online, so.
Is that any better? Is it on?
Yeah, you
Yeah. So going maybe 1 or 2 slides back, I might not have just been able to see it from the back, but could you speak a bit on the timetable for the public input stage and the challenge process? That slide there, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, as Grant mentioned, we're working on our initial proposal, which the majority of the initial proposal is relative to establishing that master list of addresses that are going to be available for these BEAD funds. So the same as the commissioners are doing with Okra right now for that next level connections round 4, we're going to put that on steroids and do it again statewide for the BEAD funds to ensure that we're not leaving any address off. So that process it will be starting October 1st, probably. We'll have a slide near the end that talks about what you can do next, and it will point to a website called connectingindiana.com. That will allow residents to take a speed test. Actually, it will take 4 at one time, and then answer a few basic questions such as how many individuals in your household are using the internet right now. Do you feel like you're located close to your wireless router where you're getting a good connection? What level of service do you subscribe to currently? All of those questions will really help us document the lack of coverage in different areas. Then we're going to ask that residents take those speed tests several days in a row, but at different times each day to collect that data. So we'll start pushing that out in our social media website and monthly newsletters. Well, we already have a little bit, but we're going to get a true focused public engagement campaign going early fall. But then we're also going to come back around and do additional stops and listening sessions and public comment session. That's really going to be almost 100% specific to make sure that we identify every last address in your county that's not connected.
Thank you.
Yep. Any others? Commissioner, you have anything?
No, you can go right ahead.
Okay, I did a really great job or a really bad job. I don't know. You want to go into?
If I may.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. When I had talked about the speed, the threshold of 120 down and up, if we have residents that are taking the test and say they meet the download speed but don't meet the upload speed, for example, are those types of addresses we still should be included with sort of guidance? Could you sort of provide about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So depending on the category, yes, those would either be unserved or underserved. So if they're hitting 25 but they're not hitting 3, that's a completely unserved area. If they're hitting 100 but they're not hitting 20, then that's definitely an underserved area. So both numbers need to be higher than the threshold or it's considered to not be fully served. Great question. So therefore, if we have some existing technologies out there, possibly still some wired telephone services that are running the internet, some of the older cable technology, some of the wireless technology that may be spotty, and at times you're hitting those thresholds, but not others. Those are definitely areas we need to capture and make sure they're eligible for this funding. Great question.
Thank you.
Anyone else online or in person?
Do you want to move on to the?
We can move on to the next steps and what can you do. If you could move down to the how can communities prepare? Maybe there we go. So on our website, and we definitely want to encourage everyone to follow Indiana Broadband Office. Bookmark our website, whatever social media platform you use. Most of my content goes to LinkedIn, but we also do Twitter and Facebook as a state agency. So definitely follow along, subscribe to our monthly newsletter. Our website is very small, so it's easy to navigate around and definitely spend some time there. And then secondly, at the federal level, Internet for All is what the White House has chosen as the tagline. And everything that Graham and his agency are doing can be searched off of that Internet for All website. It breaks it down right away for the BEAD program and the digital equity program. You can spend a lot of time reading about it, and the more individuals we have in the communities that are informed, the better we'll be able to set expectations and answer questions. Because we all know there are many times when some elected officials will talk about, well, all of this money is on the street, right? I mean, we don't have $868 million to spend right now, and even if we did and we awarded all of it today, it takes a little bit of time to run environmental to string fiber across the county, right? So we need to set some realistic expectations on when this is happening, and that really speaks to the slide that Graham showed of the timeline, but then also understanding the length of time that these construction projects take. So this is what we put together during COVID called Steps to Success. I won't go through all of them right now, but it starts with establishing a task force and becoming a broadband-ready community. So the county's already done those 2 steps, and then different counties are at different places on steps 3 to 10. Step 10 is going to be something that we're all tackling across the state for years to come. With record unemployment across the country, filling these jobs, they're going to be high-paying jobs that the individuals can be skilled up for fairly quickly, as in like 6, 8, 10, 15, 20 weeks, and many earn and learn. So from day one, the companies like AT&T, Charter, Comcast are employing individuals and putting them through paid training. So there's a lot of opportunity for some of our high school folks that are really hesitant about the next steps in their career to be making $45,000, $50,000, $60,000, you know, by early 2024 with a fiber splicing job or something like that. So there's some real opportunities there, but we need to really work as communities to destigmatize what these kids are doing post high school, and look for every individual that we can upskill and get them into the workforce. This simply isn't a broadband initiative. This is a works initiative, and it spreads across water, sewer, electricity, roads and bridges, you name it. We are going to have to find the workforce to do these jobs, and a lot of your kids and grandkids are going to be perfect for those roles. So definitely workforce is something to be attuned to at the county level moving forward. That, and making sure you have your house in order as far as anything at the county level that can be controlled by the county. Please work on it now. We do not want permitting delays. We do not want environmental delays. We do not want homeowners complaining because their yard, which is really the right-of-way, is being dug up, or a pole had to go in at the corner of their property. We need to really be out in front with messaging that this investment is coming, and that while there may be some short-term inconveniences, we need to look long-term about what all of this means. And the Steps to Success really points to that. So I would encourage you to take a look at it and share it with your friends and neighbors. This map on the right is really exciting. LaPorte County became broadband ready several months ago, maybe over a year ago. We're super excited to see how many counties have taken up that initiative. And what that initiative states is that you have a single point of contact in your county that will be the facilitator. As these questions come in, that individual may not know the answer to that broadband related question, but they can funnel you to the appropriate agency or person to help answer that question. And many times that's an internet service provider that is inquiring about a given area or a given permit, or how can we help in the area, or a nonprofit that has some digital equity initiatives, free training, free laptops, discounts on the bills, those sort of things. So having those local resources available, because we need to do a lot more than simply building out this infrastructure. That's only a piece of the puzzle. I think we've talked enough about the 5-year plan. It's posted on our website. It's about 80 pages. If you want to do some reading into what we've been doing the last 9 months, definitely take a look at that. And then we'll do the same thing when we put the initial proposal out around Christmas time, is we'll post that and ask for some comments again. That's timeline. I think we can go past that. Next, after this, eligible areas we discussed already. You want to talk about the state challenge process a little bit more in recap? And then I think we go to final questions again.
maybe what we could do is we could take some questions, then maybe do a little demo of the FCC map
Good
and I can go down there and Vanna white this for you if you'd like.
Any questions about some of the things that we're asking county leadership to be doing in the coming months to be ready for this mega build out that's coming? I can't stress the importance enough of acting now and using this year and a half while the state is planning to also be doing planning and organizing yourselves. Things like a communications method. We've heard over and over in counties and small towns, there's a white truck out on county road, whatever. If we would have known that they were coming, then we would have alerted those homeowners or those farmers. Well, what is that communication process? What does that mean if we would have known? So we need to have all those put in place. The state will be providing some basic guidance and templates in the coming months, but please don't wait on us. Have those. Be thinking about those kind of things. Be thinking about every complaint phone call that you receive, or who stops you in the grocery store, wherever that may be, and what they're complaining about, and not simply solving that one problem. We know how busy all of you are, but putting systems in place that doesn't grow exponentially when this infrastructure money hits the streets. So I can't stress that enough. But any questions specific to action items or challenges that we've laid out for the county and community for the coming months? Online or in person here?
Randy Novak. Quick question. Is the list that you sent to the commissioners, those addresses, are those the ones that the county needs to be focusing on for making sure that everything's clear and free for the permitting and things? Or what point does the county get kind of the route that it's going, so we know where to work?
That master list, which I think you said was about 42,000 in your county, is a starting point. Well, I will be the first to admit that Okra added some addresses to that list that probably are already served. I found Perry Meridian High School in the south side of Indianapolis on that list, and we know that high school has connectivity. So there's going to be some errors and omissions there. So whatever the GIS team may be, my recommendation would be to reach out to 2 or 3 of your key ISP partners in the county and ask them to take the lead on that. They have the manpower and they have the technology, and they're going to be the ones submitting the applications, and make sure that you're having a two-way conversation about how they are really identifying what you have left as unserved and then adding your anecdotal. I know that above County Road 800 they don't have service and it doesn't pick up again until 1200. Those sort of scenarios that you know about locally, you can feed that to the ISPs, challenge them to get that master list cleaned up for you, and then you simply hit send by the September deadline. Right. That's the approach I would recommend.
Thank you.
Jim Pressel. So can you talk a little bit more about the challenge process, where we're at with that from where we started? And when you say the state's going to be working on that, is that the General Assembly working on that, or is that your office?
Can you explain what you mean by where we are compared to where we started?
We started out, so State Representative Jim Pressel, I should say, and I served on utilities. When we started the challenge process and when we really went down the path of expanding broadband to unserved areas and underserved. So locally, what I experienced with constituents was we applied for some of these grants way early on, but there was a provider that popped up and said, hey, wait, I service that area. Well, they may or may not really service that area. They service it with a dish and it's blocked by trees, so they can't get to them.
Sure.
Now, I know we've kind of streamlined that just a little bit. So maybe where are we with the challenge process? What qualifies as a challenge now as I'm a service provider? And where are we at? And then the changes that you talked about happening in that process, is that your office or is that me?
Sure. Great question. I apologize for not recognizing your representative. I stare at the poster every day in my office when I'm on the phone.
I'm incognito.
Exactly, yes. But great question. So the Next Level Connection program has done amazing things in Indiana, but I think we can all recognize that there's gaps, and maybe it's hit a limit of of where we go from here. And I think that's the beauty of the BEAD program, is that they've thrown so much of the decision making on the state. Now, how we take that between the executive and legislative branch and iron it out is definitely a discussion for Indianapolis and folks above my pay grade, I think. But I can add some comments and then maybe a few of my own personal suggestions, since I've lived this now nonstop for 3 years, to the point of my wife doesn't want to have dinner with me most nights after work, right?
I feel your pain.
I'm sure. So the challenge process in Next Level Connections, especially rounds 1 and round 2, was very loose. As I review it, round 1 we were still dealing with the 10-1 speed threshold. So almost all of that data in my mind is almost dead data. But I would assume that the projects that were funded in round 1 were projects that we're not going to overbuild with these funds, because the technology that was built in round 1 is still quality technology even 5 years later, right? But the challenges themselves, those areas that have gone without coverage for 5 more years because of a challenge, I don't know. I know that Okra didn't have the manpower and hasn't put a program together to go back and check on those challenges. It would be an interesting activity. Because I can name a handful of providers that I know didn't ever live up to what they said that they were already doing or were going to do in rounds 1 and rounds 2. But maybe that ship sailed, and that's a lesson learned moving forward for all of us. The beauty of the BEAD funds is that it continues to be a reimbursement program, just like Next Level Connections. And I think that's where we did lead as a state early on, first of all, in having a state funding program, but secondly, the vision that we weren't going to send the money out until we were confident that the work was being done. And I think Okra does those reimbursements on a quarterly basis. That will continue. But we have a lot of technology today that we didn't have 5 years ago that we've invested in, or that's complementary, or that the federal government's invested in. With the use of that technology, I feel like our office can adjudicate any challenge and get it right. If we are given the flexibility to do that, we can make sure that we turn in an accurate list to NTIA, and that we don't overbuild areas with quality funding, and that we don't leave anyone behind. Where we go in the short session, as far as legislation, we would like to see less legislation on broadband as opposed to more. There's some pretty strong mandates from the feds on how we do things in the systems of checks and balances. So if we get into January and have our initial proposal turned into NTIA and are working on our final proposal, and some legislation comes in and doesn't mirror some of our recommendations, first of all, we can't be assured that NTIA approves anything that we send in as a first draft. There'll be some curing. But if there's some legislation that maybe is driven by industry, I think we can all acknowledge that industry answers to shareholders, and we answer, you and I both answer to the citizens of Indiana. We need to keep in mind and do what's best for the citizens of Indiana, but at the same time recognize that these big ISPs are very important pieces to the puzzle, and we want to work with them as much as we can. But where they want to stop their build out, there's still residents left that we have to serve. So whether that's language that's written by our legislators or a program that's put in place in our office, we are going to be expected to serve everyone, even though a given ISP wants to stop at a certain county road and doesn't find a business case moving north of that road.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I would just, Ernie did a great job answering that question. I would just say, I think, to put a plug in for NTIA, I think with a lot of the pre-planning dollars that we provided with the state, they're going to be able to hire additional staff and have additional data sets to help adjudicate some of those challenges, so that the result is more accurate for the BEAD program. So that was a good answer, though. I'm going to go ahead and demo two of the things that I talked about earlier, and if you want to maybe describe what I'm doing while I'm doing it. This is the FCC National Broadband Map. It's kind of what I mentioned earlier. And so you can plug in just about any address in the United States and see what services are available at each address. And you can also actually search kind of by providers. If you wanted to see kind of the areas where a certain provider was, you could search that way. But I'm going to go for the purposes, I'm going to just look at different locations here, and I'll zoom in on LaPorte County. One thing to mention when you go on this map, you'll be really shocked because it looks like everywhere in the United States is covered, and that is because this process started well before the Broadband Infrastructure Law was passed. So this isn't going to include every single technology that's available, and for the purposes of BEAD, the eligible technologies do not include satellite or unlicensed fixed wireless, because those through other federal broadband programs have proven to be not a reliable forms of broadband. So when you're on this website, hold on, I need to get this out of the way. You want to click on this little gear here and select all wired and licensed fixed wire technologies, and that'll give you a better idea. And then you can toggle between the different speeds too. But just for purposes of BEAD, we'll look at all wired licensed fixed technologies, and the speed we'll put to the underserved threshold. And this probably looks a little bit more accurate if we zoom in here to LaPorte County. You got a lot of spots here. It's probably not surprising to a lot of folks in this room, but this southern part of the county has a lot of connectivity issues here, and so not a lot of providers. I'll just kind of zoom in on an area just for fun. We'll look here at Westville, and if you click on an address, it'll pop up here with the address, and then all of the different providers that are available at each address. And what's going to be listed here is the provider, the technology, and then the maximum advertised speed of that provider. So it looks like at this location in Westville, they have Mediacom, cable provider, and then it looks like Surf Wireless has a fiber tech product here, and then Verizon has a licensed fixed wireless product that of two of the three here, of those three, get over the underserved threshold. So this location would be considered served for the purposes of the BEAD program. I'll just kind of go down here, maybe try to find one that's not served. So it looks like this location here, County Road in Westville, there's not a eligible technology that gets over that 25.3 threshold. So this would be considered not served for the purposes of BEAD. And I'll just kind of go. So one thing you can do is, so say you live here, this is your home, and you believe that the map here says that it is served probably because this T-Mobile product that gets at 100/20. You can file an availability challenge that right here, and you can tell the FCC that you don't actually receive the service from that provider at this location, and then they'll take you through. They'll ask you some questions about your service and all that fun stuff, and you can submit. So any individual can help improve the FCC broadband map, and I encourage folks to kind of take a look at their area and kind of get an idea of what's available, and if something looks off to you or things like that, you can take action there. Ernie, anything that you think we should talk about?
Yeah, can you click to the location challenge also?
Yeah.
Especially in rural communities, this is rooftop data. So there are times where if a barn is of similar size to the home, the FCC may have it as the barn is the broadband serviceable location and not the home. And then at times that can make a difference based on the, how long the driveway is to the home compared to how far it is from the road to the barn. So there's a location challenge that's available too for situations like that. Or if you're looking at your road and a new home has been put in on the road somewhere, please reach out to those neighbors if their home is not on the map, and make sure that they get themselves included through the location challenge process that Graham can click on here.
I'll add that this map is updated every 6 months by the FCC. So we're on version 2. The first version came out last November. The second version came out in May, and we're expecting version 3.0 to come out in November of this year. So it's an iterative process, and it's continually updated, and hopefully, every time it gets updated, hopefully the data continues to get better and better, and it will help the state with their BEAD allocation. You want to talk a little bit about the Connected Indiana?
Sure. So this is the homepage of our connectingindiana.com website. You can see the boxes in the bottom left-hand corner of test your internet and take the survey. Very easy to remember, connectingindiana.com. We tried to use all the same colors and logos and stock photographs as our website to keep it consistent. But Graham, you want to scroll down to the bottom of that page to view data by county and double click on LaPorte a couple times. So this is very good data for to inform you with the question about where I said working with your ISPs, being able to scroll down to the census block level and get some quality analytics of where you are as a county. This is a great starting point and a tool that we did make public facing. This is a mapping software platform that we purchased from a third-party vendor called Ready.net. So definitely spend some time taking a look at this because it uses algorithms and AI and some internal decision making based on the speed tests that are available. They've already purchased a couple speed test platforms at the national level that are populated with thousands and thousands of dots each year. So that is all being factored into the decision making of why a census block is a particular color. And instead of only having two to choose from, served or unserved, it says there's 7 different categories that you can see from the color scheme under the map that goes from dark red to light blue and tells you almost the percentage of likelihood that their algorithm is going to be right in that census block in labeling the way that it labels. And I believe it also says how many homes or passings are in each of those census blocks. And it also gives you some great data from American Community Surveys about poverty and age of residents and high school diplomas and those sort of things that can be useful maybe in some other areas of your county leadership. We'll likely use this platform all through the state challenge process that we talked about a little bit to make sure that our list of addresses are as close to 100% correct as possible to make as many eligible as possible for funding. So we'll use this platform and be giving some guidance on how to use it during the challenge process over these next 6 months. And then we'll very likely have the ISPs be able to submit their applications directly into this platform so we can automatically do some of the grant processing instead of having it 100% manual. So this platform is being built at the national level to service ISPs all through the life cycle of the BEAD grants that will likely run to almost 2030. Any questions on the FCC map or the connectingindiana.com speed tests?
I have a quick question. So can you just reiterate, so that FCC website, residents can actually log in, correct, and challenge their own addresses that they see on here? Is that what you're saying? Or
That's correct. No log. Anybody can view this data. It will, if you're making the challenge, ask you some questions about yourself. But just to go on and look at the data, that you don't need to log on or create an account or anything like that. You just hit FCC broadbandmap.fcc.gov. There we go.
Yeah, for years and years, our talking our unfortunate talking point was, well, the FCC map says that your census block is served, and that could be simply because one home in one corner of a census block had coverage for whatever reason, that automatically that entire block was not eligible for state or federal funding. Now all the decisions are being made down to the address level. So for the first time ever, individual residents and small business owners can look up their home, their small business, and do a location challenge or an availability challenge. If what the ISPs are telling the FCC is not correct, you can be an advocate for yourself, and there's an adjudication process that the ISPs are mandated to follow. You'll actually see I think a yellow C lit up next to the gear icons on an address that's been previously challenged. You can follow that process all the way through to adjudication.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
And what's important to know with that is if I challenge because my service is wrong on the FCC map, that doesn't change my neighbors on either side. So unfortunately, this is going to have to be a grassroots effort that as your residents uncover errors on the FCC map, that we make sure that we have those added to the commissioner's list for Okra and that we have them on our master list when we put together our list for BEAD funding, but also that we uncover that entire area, that we document that entire area as not being served and not simply that one resident that did know to take the speed test and advocate for themselves. So passing that along to your neighbors on each side and across the street. So if there's 10 homes on the street, we get all 10 of them correct and not just the one individual that knew about this cumbersome process. And ISPs, for the first time ever, are really eager to help with this because they are wanting the map data to be correct so they can make their applications as large as possible and cash in on more grant dollars, but in the end, then also using their money to help connect all of our unserved. So this process is really coming around, but it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting at the local and state level for us to pull this off.
One thing I just want to reiterate too is just this gear icon and being able to toggle between the technologies and the speed. I remember when I first pulled this up in November of last year, and I had it set to any technology at any speed, and it was very deceiving because it just looks like everywhere in the state is covered, and we know that's not actually the case. So just wanted to hammer that point home. Very important to do that.
Yep, if you don't make those two changes manually, and we have begged the FCC to make those that Graham is showing you the default, and it's just not going to happen for whatever reason. If you don't make those two changes manually, it pulls in all of the SpaceX and the low Earth satellite data, which is then going to show Indiana's 100% coverage. So even when Graham clicks on that wireline and licensed fixed wireless, in the bottom right, those companies still show up, but their speeds are not a determinant of the served or underserved. So even though HughesNet is always going to say 25.3, if you've changed that box, it will still show up as unserved, even though HughesNet or SpaceX is saying that they serve it.
Anything else that you'd like us to talk about or demo?
Can you just go through the process again with how the ISPs, make the application, and then what happens with that grant money, right? So it comes from the state directly to the ISPs, correct?
Yeah, it's going to come from NTIA to the Indiana Broadband Office, and they'll be selecting subgrantees for project areas, and they'll be select the subgrantees will be in service. Yes, ISPs.
So for Next Level Connections Round 4, we're still following the Indiana code because it's administered by Okra through the Rural Broadband Fund. So this Round 4 of Next Level Connections, which is the final $80 million, will be the commissioners get with the ISPs for the address list, and then the ISPs turn in their applications like always and say, hey, State of Indiana, we want to service this area right here, and we need this much grant money to do so. Okra will select the winners and losers. I'm guessing that we'll have 60, 70, 100 applications and only be able to fund 15 to 20 of those. 80 million divided to 5 million cap into that. So that we're going to have a lot of almost shovel-ready projects to move into the BEAD funding with based on the applications that aren't funded in Okra's Round 4. So that will be the scattershot approach of ISPs choosing their area, and we'll pull thousands of addresses off of our map because at Next Level Connections 4 will be serving them. But then when we move into the BEAD funding, we're going to have to be very strategic because we have to put every piece of the puzzle together. Next Level Connections has provided a lot of pieces to the puzzle for connectivity. The ISPs have built out on their own dollar for connectivity, and then other various federal funding have taken other addresses off our map. So we have to scrape all those funded addresses out, see what's left, and then write a plan to put together that Swiss cheese that's left as the unserved areas and make sure that we pick up everyone. So while we're still going to plan on the ISPs submitting the addresses, we're then going to be challenging them to pick up additional addresses that are just outside of where they'd like to serve, because we still have an expectation to service those Hoosiers that aren't even economically feasible for those ISPs to pick up right now. And that's really going to be the beauty of the rural electric companies and the small telcos across the state, where their vision is really focused on serving their members or serving their particular residents, and they don't have the same shareholder expectations at some of the larger guys. But all of those companies are going to be solutions for us, and we want to make that very clear. The biggest, the smallest, the co-ops, the for-profits, everything in between. We need to have every tool in our toolkit to look at leveraging. And knowing there's everyone's going to get their piece of the pie. But in the end, if we've done our job right, by close to 2030, we'll have 100% connectivity in the state, and hopefully, if we've done our job right, it's affordable and folks know how to use it.
Hey, this is Matt. This is kind of a good point for me to jump in. Jen, just want to make sure that everybody who is there, and again, I apologize for not being able to be there in person, and I appreciate the gentleman from the state coming up to let us know where we're at with the program. But just for the local electeds and some of the perhaps residents that are there, the county government is going to serve as a conduit to help and provide additional information. We are not the recipients of the funding, and we do not do the programs. So it is the private sector that has to agree to these things and agree to make these investments, and it's our job, like similar to most other utilities, to be able to help foster that. So when Ernie was talking about being prepared for right-of-way issues and as well as permitting, our team will be geared up to help in that arena, and of course help with the residents who don't have access, who would like to have the opportunity to get the access to get with the service providers. So thank you again for taking the time to come out and explain this complicated but really worthwhile programming and effort, not only on the state level but a federal level.
Yeah, thanks again. And
we're happy to stick around and answer any questions afterwards. But yeah, appreciate everybody coming out. And if we can answer questions, we'll make sure we share our contact information so you guys can get in touch with us at any time. So thanks for the invitation.
Sure, I've got one more follow up to our Okra list that we're going through. I've had a number of different citizens, community reach out to me to find out. I've pushed out stuff on social media, for example, when we got the list in. So far, everybody who's reached out to me that said has been underserved has been on the list as I go through them and I check them. But of course, there's thousands and thousands of different residences on there. If you're currently underserved and go to the map, as well as realize that Orca is a separate one. So feel free to shoot me an email if you want to double check to make sure your address is on there. Like I said, so far, all of them have been. So, but if not, feel free to reach out to me. Shoot me an email, jhaney@laporteco.in.gov, and I'll double check and make sure that your list is on there, or that your address is actually on there listed properly.
I'm Tom Dockich. I'll just throw one last thing in. Jim Pressel, Representative Pressel, is part of leadership and part of putting this together for the state. And this is, this is an unprecedented program. You guys are trying to get broadband for everybody, even people who can't figure out how to use it, but you're trying to make it available for them. And I think maybe your underlying message is kind of everybody needs to advocate for themselves a little bit. You need to take a little bit of, roll up your sleeves a little bit, Graham, and kind of say, hey, I don't have it, so why don't we go out there and get it? And Jim can pass every rule in the world, every law in the world, but it helps. You kind of set it up so all the resources are there, and you need to advocate for yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're expected by my bosses to use this money to connect every single person. But I think the more organized a community is, the better and smoother their projects will go, and we'll be relying on, the state will be relying on locals to help with all the things that, Matt was talking about, and we were probably not very eloquent about, but, participating in the state balance process so we know exactly which, addresses we need to connect, helping with permitting, things like that. And, so there is obviously we need to connect everybody and it's our responsibility, but there is definitely a defined role and a need for locals to be helpful in this process. So we get everybody connected as expeditiously as possible, and using the federal grant money as efficiently as possible. So I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. Thanks for sharing, Tom. And I think one of the things that we tried to hit on in previous listening sessions was I can encourage the folks in the room to sign up to our newsletters and our social media, and you're probably going to take it to heart and do it. But then to pass that along to everyone you know, who then passes it along to everyone they know. That's the only way we're going to get this done, is to challenge everyone to advocate for themselves, but to feed them the resources to do so. And so many of those individuals are out of our reach at the Indiana Broadband Office. So we need to leverage locals, nonprofits, churches, schools to get the word out to those folks that they serve on these two very important things. Challenge the FCC map, take the connectingindiana.com speed test, and then you're giving the state the data they need to write a quality program. Anything else before we wrap up?
Anything else? I think I'm good here. Thank you so much for coming out and spending time to go through, especially too, we appreciate the fact that you took time to educate the press and the public of the actionable items that they have to do, right? And that helps us out in economic development, because if the residents are taking the tests and they're doing the challenges, then that shares the load on us, and it makes sure that it's fair, in so many words, because it's coming from the horse's mouth and they're actually filling that data out themselves. And I love to hear that. Thanks again.
And just as a closing, I have to say, first of all, thanks for having us up here. It's very important. But on the lighter side, I wish I had something like this in my house when my kids were growing up. I really like to be able to move this microphone around and amplify my voice. So that would have been great to have in the child rearing days for sure. So with that, everyone have a great weekend, and thanks for coming out here today. We appreciate you making time at the end of a long work week.
Thank you.